Hey, how are you? Um, Thanks for coming to find out about the 11 books that I read in September. So unfortunately, I don't have physical copies of literally any of these books, which says a lot about what September was like. I either read them as audiobooks or on my trusty Kobo that I absolutely adore and use multiple hours a day every day. But I'll just put the books up here and let you know what I thought of them. So the first book that I read this month, that I finished this month, it's now October. The first book that I finished in September was Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. So Hamnet was awesome. Yeah, it was really, really good. I didn't like it at first. I found it very, very slow. So Hamnet is the retelling of Shakespeare, the lives of Shakespeare's immediate family. And what's really interesting in the book is that Shakespeare himself is never named. So it tells the story of his children, Hamnet and Judith, as well as his wife, and some extended family members. And as you may or may not know, Hamnet, Shakespeare's son, dies of the plague. So a lot of this book is talking about what it's like to die of the plague, which is a lot to read. I found it honestly quite slow, that part of the pacing. So it was like a 2 to 3 star book for me at that point, but it kind of bumped up to like a 3.5 when part 2 kicked in, which was a lot more about Shakespeare's neglect of his family, and I thought that was way more interesting and sort of the imagined perception of his wife, the imagined perception that his wife had of him. So I would recommend it if you're into historical fiction and retellings, if you like feminist retellings, and if you don't mind reading about the Black Plague for like 200 pages. Okay, the next book that I read, I absolutely loved. This was Revenge by Yoko Ogawa. I don't know how to tell you about this book. Okay, so Revenge is a collection of 11 short stories, and they're horror stories. And unless I'm mistaken, they're all told from a first-person perspective, but the narrator changes. The thing is, the stories start to reference each other. So as you keep going, it's this puzzle that begins to fit together. And there's all this really weird, super creepy imagery. Like, think corpse in an abandoned fridge in a junkyard kind of imagery. Think carrots shaped like human hands. Think a literal torture museum. That's not a spoiler, that's the title of one of the stories, if I remember correctly. It's a lot, and it's very short. It's like a really good read, actually. Would be a great read for October and for spooky season, because it is like, yeah. Yoko Ogawa's writing is absolutely amazing, and these are so good, and just I recommend it super, super widely if you're into weird and creepy and horror, and if you like seeing different people's life paths slowly kind of come together, if that makes sense. I really like this kind of thing where we follow multiple characters and eventually they come together. If that's your thing and you like horror, I really recommend Revenge. What did I read next? Oh, next I read Everything Leads to You by Nina LaCour. So I have recently become a Nina LaCour stan. I absolutely love everything that she's written, and Everything Leads to You is not an exception to that at all. It's just a sweet story. It's just nice. It's a coming-of-age sapphic romance, and if you like Taylor Jenkins Reid, I'd say, and want to read, I just realized that. If you like Taylor Jenkins Reid and like that kind of like fake famous person thing, Everything Leads to You has that sort of subplot. It reminded me a lot of Malibu Rising in terms of the setting, and it also reminded me quite a lot of Yerba Buena, which is Nina LaCour's most recent and also only adult novel. So I really recommend this one. I don't even want to say too much about it. The characters are just really endearing. It's just very like wholesome. It's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a romance. You know where it's going. You know what's going to happen, but you enjoy the ride anyway. And this is like a big 5 stars for me. I just love the writing. It's so fun to read. Okay, and then now we're in the first audiobook of the month. So the first audiobook that I finished was The Secret Lives of Trees. I didn't know what to expect with this book. I've been reading some nature writing a lot lately because I've become increasingly interested about, you know, what is all this new research that we know about, you know, plants talking to each other and fungi talking to each other and new ways in which animals communicate or use tools. Like, I love that kind of stuff. I love when we find out more about how parts of our world are actually way more sentient and way more intelligent and way more connected than we ever thought that they were. Like things that we might think are only things that humans do or highly evolved species do, we actually see them just in a different way, in a different scale in other parts of the biosphere, essentially. So The Secret Lives of Trees, it's pretty much exactly that. It's about trees communicating and telling time and preparing for seasons and storing energy and figuring out how to live with their neighbors. The audiobook is awesome. Like, if you are the kind of person who likes to fall asleep watching a documentary, like very specifically, if you find that that is the most peaceful thing in the world for you, I really recommend this book. Like, I straight up recommend it as a falling asleep book, not because it's boring, but because it's so relaxing. Like, just listening to this is like being in the best little like lecture hall, all cozy. Maybe I just miss that because I'm a student, or I'm not a student anymore. Anyway, maybe I just miss that because I used to be a student and I'm not anymore. But I don't know, it just really spoke to me. I really recommend the audiobook. This was a solid 4 stars for me. I recommend it if you're into nature at all, and if you want to just look at trees and the plants around you in a new way, or at least like start noticing certain things. This is what I've loved now. Some of the things I've learned about, you know, even how trees are distributed in nature and how they sort of negotiate whose branches go where. I've been like noticing that in the actual natural world when I go on a walk. And that's been thanks to this book. It's really sort of opened my eyes to that. So it's great. Okay, so this was a flop. What can I say about the third Millennium book? Okay, so The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest. I liked Girl with the Dragon Tattoo way more than I thought I would. Yeah, I liked it a lot, and then I loved Girl Who Played with Fire. I thought it was awesome. That was a 5-star book for me. So I had really high hopes for Hornet's Nest. I thought the series would go out with a bang. I thought we'd find out so much that... Oy vey. I straight up want to tell you that, like, if you're wanting to finish, if you've read the first 2 books and then want to read this one because you want to know more about, like, the plot and stuff, it's almost... Okay, this was, I rated it 3 stars, a very generous 3 stars. It was such a letdown compared to the other books. For about 3/4 of the book, nothing happens. And I mean literally nothing happens. Because, spoiler alert for book 2, Lisbeth is in the hospital with a gunshot wound to the head. And she's also wanted for murder. Or attempted murder, yeah. And she's just in the hospital. And nothing happens. And literally all the other peripheral characters are just explaining the events of the previous book to each other all the time. The secret police is explaining the events to each other. The Millennium journalists are explaining the events to each other. That's all that's happening in this book. It's just you're being beaten over the head with the plot from the previous book in circles. No, it was so annoying to read. It was so frustrating, and I just read it kind of out of spite, like for completionist's sake. So I will highly recommend the first 2 books. Actually, the second one's the best, and really you can read it without reading the first, but it's better to read both. I straight up don't feel good recommending the 3rd book unless you're like a completionist, because you might be disappointed. I mean, that's my opinion, but oy vey, did I not like it. I did not like it. Okay, the next book I read was The Tokyo Zodiac Murders. So this is like, The Tokyo Zodiac Murders is like reading Japanese Sherlock Holmes. It was very bizarre. So first you start off with this letter written from the point of view of a murderer who wants to make a sort of mystical, almost deity-like Frankenstein perfect human based on a lot of astrological musings or nonsense. It gets like very precise, very like Neptune is in Scorpio and all that kind of stuff. I'm not super good at astrology, but like 59th degree and all that kind of stuff. So not just like basic astrology, like a lot of detailed astrology, and details this potential murder and the supposed author of this letter, because it's called into question whether it's authentic or not, but the supposed author gets killed before those murders take place. So he gets killed, then his wife gets killed. Then this murder of their 6 daughters, his 6 daughters, sort of daughters, nieces, family-related female figures, occurs, and it seems like body parts were collected from all of them to then make this creature. And the way the book is framed is that people in Japan have been trying to solve this murder for like 40 years, and no one's been able to figure it out because there's a locked room situation, and there's all these inconsistencies, and no one's able to explain actually what happened. So most of the book follows these 2 characters who are talking to each other about the murder, and one of them is way more clever than the other. That's like our Sherlock Holmes type figure, and the other, the less clever one, is our narrator. So we're kind of taken along the journey with the narrator, which is really fun. And the author interjects now and again in the book, and there's this part where the author's like, hey, just so you know, you now have all the clues you need to solve this murder. I even gave you a really big clue. You should know by now who the murderer is. It's such a funny experience because you're like, I have no idea. I don't know what's happening. And you just keep reading. The author is giving you all these clues, and he's totally telling you, like, you could solve this murder now. And you're sitting there like, no, I can't. I literally have 0 idea who the murderer is. And the author's like, you should know. And you're like, I don't know. And then everything kind of gets revealed. It's very Sherlock Holmesy, very like, this is obviously what happened. And it's really satisfying, actually. I really, really enjoyed it. It was a solid 4 stars. I really recommend it if you're into like classic detective novels. And I also really recommend it if you're into like twisted thrillers, twisted detective novels. It's like a little more slow burn though, and it is a little literary. So if you're very like, I need a super fast-paced thriller where things happen all the time, this might bore you because it's almost like a little more, it's reflecting on a past murder rather than watching things happen. So take that with a grain of salt. I do in general recommend this book though. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool. I picked it up on a total whim and it was awesome. Okay, so after that I finished another audiobook, and this was Elektra by Jennifer Saint. Elektra was great. So it's from the point of view of 3 women retelling the Iliad, basically. It's a feminist retelling of the Iliad from the points of view of Cassandra, Clytemnestra, and Elektra. It was great. Honestly, it was just really, really good. I would almost say Elektra is actually the minor character among those 3 and possibly the least sympathetic character among those 3, which, so I was a little bit surprised by the choice of title. I really liked her previous book, Ariadne, as well, and that one I just read on my e-reader, while this I listened to the audiobook, and the audiobook has 3 separate narrators who do an incredible job conveying the emotions involved. Because that's really what this book explores. It's not the actions of the Iliad. Like, you're probably familiar at least with some of what happens. There were some surprises for me, and I don't know the Iliad super well, but I know it semi-well, and there were a couple of surprises. But it's the emotion and mental processing of the characters that's like most interesting. So I really enjoyed this as like a full, as like, yeah, 3 women just telling you about the painful story of this war and these revolutions and these fights for a throne. I really recommend it if you're into the whole like Greek mythology literary retellings. It's really good. I mean, everyone's like into Song of Achilles. Achilles is in here, so is Patroclus. They're minor characters, but they're here. So if you want to see the, the female side of that story, it's worth reading. I liked it. Okay, next book I read belongs to this, what in my head I call this a micro genre. I don't know if this is a real categorization, but this is my favorite kind of fiction. It is soft post-apocalyptic sci-fi. What do I mean by soft is that the sci-fi elements aren't actually that important to the story, like they just sort of create a setting. But the story is about human problems and human solutions, and oriented on relationships. So other books that this reminds me of are things like Station 11 and How High We Go in the Dark, Sea of Tranquility, maybe even Parable of the Sower. If anyone knows what this genre is called, please tell me, because I loved it. So I loved Good Morning Midnight. The premise of Good Morning Midnight is we're following 2 characters. One of them is stuck at an Arctic outpost. He is an astronomer. Yeah, astronomer. And he decided to stay at this Arctic outpost even though everyone else was evacuating because there's been some sort of cataclysm. And the problem is that once he's there, all the radios go quiet and he doesn't know what's going on in the outside world. Everything's just quiet. And one day he actually finds that a little girl has been left behind. She's about 8 years old and he tries to kind of take care of her. So really at this outpost is just him and her. He has no idea what's happening in the world. Then the other character we're following is a woman who's on a spaceship that's returning from Jupiter. It was like a space exploration mission and they've been gone for a little while, and she's on this like 5 or 6 person crew, part of a 5 or 6 person crew, and they also lose all contact with any radio signals from Earth. It just goes quiet. So they don't know what's happening either. Is everyone dead? Is just the whole grid down? We don't know. We don't know. And we're just following these 2 stories back to back. One of them in the Arctic, set with the most beautiful literary descriptions of like snow and the Arctic, the midnight sun and the polar night. It was mesmerizing. Like the writing is so beautiful, and then we have this like vastness, this like vast emptiness. And then conversely, when we're set in space, we also have like the vastness of space that's just described in this beautiful way. And we get backstory on both our characters, and we try to understand how they might relate to each other. Why are we following both of them? All of that are, secrets that I don't want to spoil, but I highly, highly recommend this book. If you like literary sci-fi, if you like this kind of like soft sci-fi, it's so good. It's so good. I loved it so much. 5 stars completely. I'm so sad I don't have a copy of it. I really want a copy of it. So I need to, next time I see one in a used bookshop, that is going immediately. I'm leaving with it. So the next book I read was an advanced reader copy, an ARC. This book is called The Happy Valley. Anyway, so this was very generously offered to me on Book Sirens, and I got the chance to read it as well as review it. And I really, really liked, I'd say, the first half of this book, and I really liked the writing of this book. So The Happy Valley follows a kind of a life of a young boy turned man in the Happy Valley, which was just this like US town. How do I even explain the plot of this book? So this book is both like coming of age and kind of gothic. There's a cult secret society situation. There's the fall of America. But those are almost like background things because it's more focused on this character's inner world and his relationship with his friends and this like version of D&D that they play, as well as his relationship with this like slightly older girl and the mystery of that and sort of how it evolves over time. So it was really interesting, and it felt like really up my alley, and it was very like it was a very show don't tell book, so I really appreciated that. I really appreciate how much the author left for us, but towards the end of it, it almost felt like we didn't get as many answers as we would have wanted. Like there were some things that really frustrated me about the book that I think the author was aware of because the character almost like commented on them. Yeah, I think this is a self-published novel, and as self-published novels go, this is like honestly quite good. I honestly would read something else by this author just because this was so fun. Like it was so convoluted, and it was also illustrated. Like there were illustrations, one or two like per chapter with them. They were so beautiful. So I do recommend sort of looking into this if any of that sounds up your alley, because it is quite a good book, and it's like a debut novel. It's, you know, not published by the Big Five. I'm trying to kind of start reading advanced readers copies from smaller authors just to sort of broaden my horizons, and this was a really good first advanced readers copy to read. Okay, we're almost at the end. So the 10th book that I read this month was this Faustian beast, If Cats Disappeared from the World. If cats disappeared from the world, I would be sad. I would be very, very sad. And so would our narrator. I mean, that's very heavily implied in the title. That's not a spoiler. So this is a book about someone who finds out that they are going to die. And they also find out, well, they get offered a deal from the devil, and the devil says, you can stay alive, but for every day you stay alive, I'll make something disappear. And he's like, yeah, that sounds good. And of course, it's the devil. You don't make deals with the devil that he's going to cheat you. So of course the devil says, okay, I can choose what the thing is. So it's not, I'll make that random, like, you know, random piece of plastic in the garbage dump disappear. No. We're going to make movies disappear. We're going to make chocolate disappear. We're going to make cats disappear. So it's a really interesting meditation on what makes life worth living. It's a short novella. It's very sweet. It's very relationship oriented. It's the big character study. I'm pretty sure I rated it 5 stars. I just really, really liked it. I really recommend it. I know I said really a lot, but it's just, yeah. If you like seeing the devil depicted as funny while making a Faustian bargain, and if you like seeing people fight their own selfishness almost, because that kind of happens, that need to like stay alive but also not want, you know, other people to miss out on cats, for example, I really recommend it. It's great Japanese literature. So the last book, a lot has been said about this book, so I don't even want to talk that much about it. But it's Jeanette McCurdy's memoir. Wow is the word that comes to mind. So this was incredible to read. I regret reading it on ebook rather than on audiobook because I know she narrates the audiobook, and I feel like that must be amazing, but also really hard. This is an extremely painful memoir. So much has been said about it. I have a lot of respect for her. I didn't grow up watching iCarly. I knew nothing about her at all. I fully enjoyed the memoir. It was a 5-star read for me. It was so engrossing. It was so moving. It was so sad. And I really don't know what to say about it other than, yeah, read it. Read it. It's really good. Even if you're only reading it for an understanding of how eating disorders can start and persist, and sort of the lies that we tell ourselves if we're suffering from addictive behavior or compulsions that we know aren't healthy for us, or things like that. I don't know. It was just so good, and it was so raw, and it was so sad. I'm glad Jeanette wrote this book. that was my main takeaway from it. So much has been said about this. I've also really enjoyed watching her interviews and watching her talk about this book. I really recommend checking those out, and if they resonate with you at all, you're gonna love the book. Just read it. Everyone's talking about it for a reason. It's just really good. Okay, so those were the 11 books that I read in September. Thanks for watching this whole video. I am now attempting to do the booktube thing. It's fun. I don't know. I like talking about books, so I hope that you enjoyed listening to me talk about books, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.